My father said, "You're dead to me," while we were still standing beside my grandfather's open grave. People heard him. No one corrected him. I was still holding the sealed envelope the attorney had pressed into my hand minutes earlier, my name typed cleanly across the front like it belonged to someone else. Why give this to me if I was being erased? Why now of all moments? And what did my grandfather know that I didn't? My brother Ethan wouldn't even look at me. My father already had. Then Mr. Whitaker stepped closer, voice low but steady. "Maya, we'll need you at the reading. You've been named executor, so apparently I wasn't the one being written out. If you're watching from somewhere outside the US, I'm curious, where are you from and what time is it there right now? I didn't think I'd ever tell this story out loud, but if you want to know what happened next, you might want to stay." Fan 2. The next morning, I arrived at Whitaker & Klein 10 minutes early. That wasn't an accident. I needed the extra time to steady myself before walking into a room where I already knew I wasn't welcome. The receptionist greeted me politely, the kind of professional warmth that doesn't ask questions. I gave my name Maya Murphy and watched her expression shift just slightly. Not judgment, recognition. As if my name already meant something here. "Mr. Whitaker is expecting you," she said. Of course he was. The conference room was at the end of a long hallway, lined with framed certificates and quiet authority. When I stepped inside, my father was already seated at the head of the table. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked irritated. Ethan sat to his right, scrolling through his phone like this was just another obligation on his calendar. He glanced up, met my eyes for half a second, then looked away. "Didn't realize this was open to extended guests," my father said, not bothering to lower his voice. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I'd learned a long time ago that reacting to him only gave him control over the room. Instead, I took the seat farthest from him and placed the envelope on the table in front of me. I still hadn't opened it. A moment later, Mr. Whitaker entered with a slim folder and a tablet tucked under his arm. He nodded to each of us, then sat across from my father. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "We'll begin with the formal reading of Harold Murphy's last will and testament. No small talk, no condolences, just procedure. That told me everything I needed to know about how this was going to go." Whitaker opened the folder and adjusted his glasses. "Before we begin distribution, I need to clarify a key appointment. Mr. Murphy named a sole executor responsible for overseeing the administration of his estate." My father leaned back slightly, hands folded, already comfortable. This was the part he had been waiting for: control, authority, continuity. Whitaker didn't look at him. "Maya Murphy," he said clearly, "you have been designated as executor of the estate." For a second, no one spoke. Then my father laughed short, sharp, and disbelieving. "That's not funny," he said. "Let's stay focused." Whitaker didn't react. "I am." Ethan straightened in his chair, his phone forgotten now. "There's got to be a mistake," he said. "Dad handled everything for Grandpa. Everyone knows that. I'm sure Mr. Murphy's reasoning will become clearer as we proceed," Whitaker replied calmly. "But to be precise, the appointment is legally binding. Ms. Murphy holds full fiduciary authority over the estate." I felt all three pairs of eyes shift to me, even though only one of them actually met mine. I didn't feel powerful. Not yet. I felt exposed. My father leaned forward, his tone changing, less mocking now, more controlled. "Maya doesn't have the experience for this," he said. "She works in, what is it again, compliance, that's not estate management." I held his gaze this time. "Compliance is literally about financial oversight and regulatory risk," I said. "So yes, I have experience." His jaw tightened just slightly. Whitaker continued before the silence could stretch. The estate, however, is not subject to immediate distribution. That got my father's attention again. What does that mean? He asked. It means Whitaker said that all major assets, property accounts, investments are to remain in holding until specific conditions are satisfied. Which conditions? Ethan asked. Whitaker turned a page. A full internal audit of all financial activity connected to Mr. Murphy's accounts over the last 36 months. The room shifted, not visibly, not dramatically, but I felt it. My father's posture changed. Ethan's eyes flicked toward him before settling back on the table. It was subtle, but it wasn't nothing. That's unnecessary, my father said too quickly. I managed everything personally. There's nothing to audit. Whitaker didn't argue. He just read. The audit is mandatory. No distributions may occur until it is completed and reviewed by the executor. That word again, executor. My father exhaled slowly through his nose like he was recalibrating. Fine, he said. Then let's get it done. We'll cooperate fully. It sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. Because something about the way Ethan avoided eye contact told me this wasn't just paperwork. Whitaker closed the folder halfway but didn't stand. There is one additional clarification, he said. No one spoke. If the audit identifies any irregularities, undisclosed transfers, or misuse of funds, he continued, the estate will not be distributed as originally structured. My father's voice came out lower this time. What does that mean? It means the assets will be transferred into a protected trust, Whitaker said, to be administered solely at the discretion of the executor. Silence again. This time it was heavier. I felt it settle into the space between us, thick and undeniable. My father didn't look at me immediately. When he finally did, there was something new behind his eyes. Not anger. Calculation. You're really going to drag this out? He asked quietly. After everything this family has been through. There it was. The shift from authority to pressure. From certainty to persuasion. I didn't answer right away, because for the first time since the funeral, I understood something clearly. This wasn't about grief. This wasn't even about inheritance. This was about control and the possibility that he might be losing it. I'm going to follow the terms of the will, I said. Nothing more. Nothing less. Whitaker gave a small nod as if that was the only answer he expected. Then we'll begin the audit process immediately, he said. Ms. Murphy, I'll coordinate with you directly. My father leaned back again, but the confidence from earlier was gone. Ethan picked up his phone but didn't unlock it. And me, I reached for the envelope in front of me, the one I still hadn't opened. Because suddenly, it didn't feel like a formality anymore. It felt like a warning. 3 days later, I stood in front of my grandfather's house with a key that no longer felt like mine. The place hadn't changed from the outside. Same brick, same trimmed hedges, same quiet street where nothing ever seemed urgent. But standing there, I could feel the difference, like the house had already started deciding who it would let in and who it wouldn't. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly like old paper and polished wood. Familiar. Controlled. My grandfather had liked things in order. Maya, I turned. Clara Jenkins. Mrs. Jenkins, to anyone outside the family, stood at the end of the hallway, hands folded in front of her apron. She'd worked for my grandfather for over 20 years. She knew this house better than anyone. I wasn't sure if you'd come back, she said gently. I didn't think I would, I admitted. Her eyes softened, but she didn't say anything else. That was one thing I'd always appreciated about her. She didn't fill silence just to make it easier. I need access to his office, I said after a moment. She hesitated. Just slightly. "Your father was here yesterday," she said. "He asked me to keep that room locked." "Of course he did." I nodded like that was expected. "Did he say why?" "No," she said. Then after a pause, "But he stayed in there for a long time." I let that sit for a second. "Do you still have the spare key?" I asked. Her gaze shifted not away from me but inward, like she was weighing something. Then she turned without a word and disappeared into the back hallway. When she came back, she held out a small brass key. "He never asked me to give this to him," she said quietly. "He asked me to keep it." That was all I needed to hear. "Thank you," I said. She nodded once. "If you need anything, I'll be in the kitchen." I walked down the hallway slowly past framed photos that suddenly felt staged. Holidays, birthdays, all the moments where we'd looked like a family that worked. The office door was at the end. I unlocked it and stepped inside. The room was exactly as my grandfather had left it. Bookshelves lined with labeled binders, desk cleared except for a pen holder and a leather blotter. Everything had a place. Except now something felt disturbed. Not messy, just touched. I moved toward the desk first. The top drawer opened easily, stationery envelopes, nothing unusual. The second drawer held old correspondence neatly stacked. But the third drawer stuck. I pulled harder and it finally gave with a quiet snap. Inside were file folders, some labeled, some not. I started flipping through them, scanning quickly. Bank statements, investment summaries, property tax records. But then I noticed something. Gaps. Not random ones. Specific ones. There were sequences missing, months where records should have been but weren't. And not just one account, multiple. I sat down slowly. This wasn't someone misfiling paperwork. This was someone removing it. I pulled out one of the remaining statements and checked the dates. Then another. The pattern was consistent. Every missing set of documents lined up with the same time frame. The last 3 years. The exact period the will required to be audited. I leaned back in the chair, my mind already starting to map it out. Someone knew this audit was coming. Or at least they were preparing for something that looked like it. I stood up and moved to the bookshelf. Each binder was labeled by category: accounts, real estate, trust, docs. I pulled one down and opened it. Inside, everything was intact. Too intact. These weren't working files. They were curated, clean copies, summaries. The kind you showed someone when you wanted them to believe everything was in order. Not the kind you used when you were actually tracking money. I closed the binder and set it aside. Check irregular withdrawals. The words from my grandfather's handwritten note came back to me. He hadn't said missing documents. He'd said withdrawals. I went back to the desk and checked the back panel. Nothing. Then the sides. Then the underside. That's when I felt it, a slight ridge beneath the drawer frame. I crouched down and ran my fingers along it again. There. A seam. Carefully cut, nearly invisible unless you were looking for it. I pressed gently. Nothing. Then harder. A soft click. A narrow compartment slid open just beneath the bottom drawer. My heartbeat picked up, not fast, but steady, in a way that told me I was about to confirm something I wasn't sure I was ready to know. Inside the compartment was a small black USB drive. No label, no markings, just placed there like it had been waiting. I held it in my hand for a moment, weighing it not physically, but for what it represented. Because this wasn't something my father would leave behind by accident. This was something my grandfather had hidden on purpose. I closed the compartment, slid the drawer back into place, and stood up. Maya Clara's voice came from the hallway. "Yes, your brother just pulled into the driveway." Of course he did. I looked around the room one more time, making sure nothing had been moved out of place. Then I slipped the USB into my coat pocket. When I stepped out into the hallway, Ethan was already inside, keys in his hand like he belonged here. He looked at me, then at the office door behind me. "You're not supposed to be in there," he said. I didn't answer that. Looking for something, he added. There was something in his tone now. Not curiosity, not even annoyance. Concern. I met his eyes. "Just doing my job," I said. His jaw tightened. "Dad said to leave this alone," he replied. I gave a small, almost polite nod. "Dad doesn't get to decide that anymore." For a second, it looked like he might say something else. Then he didn't. He just stood there watching me a little too carefully, and that was when I knew. Whatever was on this drive, he was afraid of it. I didn't plug in the USB right away. That might sound cautious, but it wasn't fear. It was discipline. In compliance, you don't open unknown data on impulse, especially when you already suspect it was hidden for a reason. You control the environment first. You make sure whatever you're about to uncover doesn't get erased, corrupted, or worse, noticed. So I waited until I got home. My apartment was quiet, almost too quiet after the tension of that house. I locked the door, drew the blinds halfway, and set my laptop on the table. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the USB. It was lighter than it should have felt. I turned it over in my fingers, studying it, as if it might reveal something before I even plugged it in. No markings, no scratches, recently handled. Someone had used this. Carefully, I connected it to a spare laptop I used for work audits. Isolated, no cloud sync, no automatic backup. Old habits. Useful ones. The screen blinked once. Then the drive appeared. One folder. No name. That alone told me more than I wanted it to. I clicked it open. Inside were 3 types of files: spreadsheets, emails, and one video. I didn't open the video first. Emotion can wait. Data can't. I started with the spreadsheets. At first glance, they looked like standard transaction logs, dates, amounts, account numbers. But the formatting was inconsistent, like they'd been compiled from different systems. That wasn't unusual by itself. What mattered was the pattern. Transfers out of my grandfather's primary accounts, small at first, then larger, then routed through intermediary accounts that didn't belong to him. I pulled up a second screen and started mapping them out. Each transfer split into 2 or 3 smaller ones. Each smaller transfer routed through a different entity, and then reassembled. Same total amount, different destination. That wasn't sloppy. That was intentional. Layering. A basic way to make money harder to trace without triggering immediate alarms. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. This wasn't just someone borrowing money. This was a system. I opened the email folder next. Dozens of threads, most of them short, direct. No greetings, no signatures, just instructions. Move the amount before month end. Use the second account this time. Don't let him see the statements. I didn't need to guess who him was, but I kept reading anyway. Then I found the one that made me stop. Subject line: before he changes anything. No names, just a message. We need to move the rest before he locks it down. I don't trust that he won't rewrite everything. Do it quietly. Below it, a reply. Already working on it. Using the consulting account. Won't trace back. Consulting account. I searched the spreadsheets for that phrase. It showed up almost immediately. Registered under a company name I didn't recognize, but the authorized signatory, Ethan Murphy. I closed my eyes for a second. Not long. Just enough to reset. Because this wasn't speculation anymore. This was evidence. I opened the last email thread in the folder. Shorter than the others. Just one line. If she finds anything, it's on you. No reply. No context. Just that. I stared at it longer than I meant to. She. That wasn't about my grandfather. That was about me. I minimized the email window and sat there for a moment, letting everything settle into place. The missing documents, the rushed transfers, the audit clause in the will. My grandfather hadn't been confused. He'd been preparing, and he'd known exactly who he couldn't trust. I moved the cursor to the last file in the folder. The video. There was no preview image, just a timestamp. 3 minutes and 42 seconds. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to see it, but because I already knew what it would be. Confirmation. The kind that doesn't leave room for interpretation. I clicked. The screen flickered, then resolved into a slightly shaky frame, like it had been recorded on a phone and placed somewhere discreet. My grandfather's office. Same desk, same shelves, different atmosphere. My grandfather was standing behind the desk, one hand resting on the surface, the other gripping a folder. Across from him, my father, Thomas Murphy. You think I wouldn't notice my grandfather's voice cut through the room sharper than I'd ever heard it? You think I don't know my own accounts? My father didn't answer right away. He looked calm. Too calm. You're overreacting, he said finally. Everything I've done has been for the family. For the family, my grandfather repeated. You moved money without authorization. I moved it where it would be protected, my father replied. You're not thinking clearly anymore. There was a pause. Not silence. Something heavier. You're calling me incompetent, my grandfather asked quietly. I'm saying someone has to make decisions, my father said, and it shouldn't be someone who's about to hand everything over to... He stopped. But it was too late. To who my grandfather pressed. Another pause. Then my father said it. To Maya. The room shifted. Even through a screen I could feel it. My grandfather straightened slightly, his grip on the folder tightening. She's the only one who hasn't tried to take something from me, he said. My father let out a short laugh. She's not built for this, he said. She doesn't understand how things work. No, my grandfather replied. She understands exactly how they work. That's why she won't abuse it. The video glitched slightly, then stabilized. My father leaned forward, lowering his voice. You're making a mistake, he said. And if you go through with this, you're going to tear this family apart. My grandfather didn't hesitate. It's already broken, he said. I'm just deciding what survives. The video ended there. No resolution, no apology, just truth. I stared at the screen for a long time after it went black, because now I understood something I hadn't fully allowed myself to before. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't mismanagement. This was deliberate. And I wasn't just uncovering it. I was the reason it had been hidden in the first place. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I let it ring once, twice. Then I picked it up. Maya Murphy, a voice asked. Yes, this is Harold Whitaker. I thought you should know your father has requested an emergency review of your authority as executor. Of course he had. They're claiming you're acting in bad faith, he added. I almost smiled. Are they? I said. Yes, he replied. And they're moving quickly. I looked back at the USB still connected to my laptop, at the files, at the video, at the truth they hadn't expected me to find this soon. That's fine, I said. So am I. I ended the call and closed the laptop slowly, because whatever they thought this was, a delay, a bluff, a chance to scare me into stepping back, they were about to find out it wasn't. It was evidence, and now it was mine. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because my mind wouldn't stop organizing. That's what I do when something matters. I don't panic. I sort. By the time the sun came up, I had 3 separate folders on my laptop: transactions, communications, direct evidence, clean, structured, cross-referenced. If anyone challenged me, I wouldn't be reacting, I'd be presenting. At 9 sharp, I walked back into Whitaker and Klein. This time I wasn't early. My father and Ethan were already there again, seated in the same positions as before. It would have been almost predictable if the tension in the room hadn't shifted so noticeably. My father didn't greet me. He studied me, like he was trying to figure out how much I knew. Ethan didn't even pretend this time. He kept his eyes down, jaw tight. Whitaker entered a minute later, closing the door behind him with a quiet, deliberate click.
"I understand there's a concern regarding the executor's conduct," he said, taking his seat.
My father leaned forward immediately. "Yes," he said. "We believe Maya is acting beyond her scope, making accusations, interfering with normal estate processing, and potentially misinterpreting financial data." That was careful language, not denial. Positioning. I set my laptop on the table and opened it without responding. "Do you have anything to support that claim?" Whitaker asked. My father gestured toward me. "She's been digging through private records, drawing conclusions without context. That's not oversight, that's interference." I looked up. "As executor, I'm legally obligated to review financial activity tied to the estate," I said, "especially when there's a mandatory audit clause." Whitaker nodded slightly.
"That is correct."
My father exhaled slowly, then shifted tone again, softer, almost patient. "Maya," he said, like we were having a conversation instead of a hearing, "you're overcomplicating this. Your grandfather trusted me to manage things for years. There's no reason to assume something's wrong now. There it was. Not authority, not anger, reassurance. The kind designed to make me doubt myself. I didn't take it. I didn't assume anything I said. I followed the data." Then I turned the laptop toward Whitaker.
"Would you like to see it?"
He didn't hesitate.
"Yes."
I opened the first file: transaction logs mapped into a simple flow diagram. "These are transfers out of my grandfather's primary accounts over the last 36 months, I said. "They start small, then increase in frequency and size." Whitaker leaned in, slightly scanning. "Each transaction is split into smaller amounts." I continued, then routed through intermediary accounts before being consolidated again. "Why?" he asked. "To reduce visibility," I said. "It avoids triggering standard monitoring thresholds." My father shifted in his chair.
"That's speculation," he said. "You're interpreting normal financial management as something else."
I didn't look at him. "I'm describing a pattern," I replied. Then I opened the next file. "These intermediary accounts," I said, "are tied to shell entities. One of them is registered under a consulting firm." I clicked once more. The registration details appeared. "Authorized signatory Ethan Murphy." The room went quiet. Ethan didn't speak, didn't even move. My father did. "That doesn't prove anything," he said quickly. "Ethan runs multiple business ventures. That account could be entirely legitimate. It could be, I agreed, if the funds entering it had been authorized." I pulled up the next document. They weren't. Whitaker's expression didn't change, but I saw the shift in his posture. Attention. Focus. "This email," I said, opening the thread, references moving funds before he changes anything. "The timing matches the transfers." I scrolled. "And this one confirms the use of the consulting account to route those funds." Whitaker read silently for a moment. Then he asked the only question that mattered. "Do you have direct evidence of intent?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened the final file. The video. I didn't play the entire thing, just enough. My grandfather's voice. Sharp. Clear. "You moved money without authorization." then my father's. I moved it where it would be protected. I paused the video there. No commentary, no interpretation, just the moment. Whitaker leaned back slightly, eyes still on the screen.
That's
significant, he said. My father's voice came out lower this time.
You're taking that out of context,
he said. That was a private conversation. You don't know what led up to it. I closed the laptop. I know enough, I said. The room didn't explode. There was no dramatic confrontation, just a quiet shift, like something had finally tipped. Whitaker folded his hands. Based on what I've seen, he said carefully, there is sufficient cause to proceed with a formal audit under the terms of the will. My father didn't interrupt this time. He just watched. And Whitaker continued, given the nature of the evidence, I'll need to review the contingency clause in more detail. Ethan finally spoke. What clause, he asked. Whitaker turned to him.
If financial misconduct is confirmed, he said, the estate will not be distributed directly.
He paused. Instead, it will be transferred into a protected trust administered solely by the executor. Silence. Real silence this time. Ethan looked at my father. My father didn't look back. What does that mean? Ethan asked again, quieter now. It means Whitaker said you would not have direct access to the assets. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to, because for the first time since this started, the power in the room wasn't theoretical. It was defined, and it wasn't his anymore. My father stood slowly. This isn't over, he said. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement. I never thought it was, I replied. He held my gaze for a second longer, then turned and walked out. Ethan hesitated just long enough to look at me like he wanted to say something. Then he followed, the door closed behind them. Whitaker exhaled quietly.
You handled that well,
he said. I nodded once, but I wasn't thinking about the meeting. I was thinking about something else, because one part of this still didn't fit. I reopened my laptop and pulled up the account flagged under my name, the one I hadn't authorized, the one that connected me directly to everything they'd done. I turned the screen toward Whitaker. There's one more issue, I said. He looked at the file, then back at me. This account, I continued, was used to route part of the funds, and he asked. I didn't open it. That got his full attention.
Are you certain? Yes.
He studied the document again, slower this time. Then someone created it in your name, he said. Or used my identity to legitimize the transfers, I replied. Whitaker closed the folder in front of him. That complicates things, he said. It did more than that. It changed the direction of everything, because this wasn't just about what they took anymore. It was about what they tried to make it look like I had taken. And if I couldn't prove otherwise, I wouldn't just lose control of the estate. I'd lose everything else with it. The moment I left Whitaker's office, I stopped thinking like a daughter. I started thinking like someone under investigation. Because that's what this was now, whether anyone had said it out loud yet or not. If my name was on that account, it didn't matter what I knew. It mattered what I could prove. I didn't go home. I went straight to the one place I trusted to treat facts like facts, the bank. Not the branch where customers sit and wait in line. The internal office where audit requests actually get processed. I still had access badges from my previous role, and more importantly, I still had people who knew how I worked. James Holloway was one of them. He looked up when I stepped into his office, surprise flickering across his face before settling into something more focused. Maya Murphy, he said. I was wondering how long it would take before this landed on your desk. I closed the door behind me. So you've heard. Only that there's an estate audit tied to your family name, he said, and that your name showed up in a flagged account. He didn't sugarcoat it. Good. I didn't open it, I said. I figured he replied. Not hesitation, not doubt, just acceptance. That steadied something in me I hadn't realized was still unsettled. I need everything tied to that account, I said. Creation documents, access logs, IP records, authorization, signatures, anything that shows how it was set up and who's been using it. James leaned back in his chair, thinking.
That's not a standard pull, he said. You're basically asking for a forensic trace. I know. And if this escalates, he added, those records won't just stay internal. I know that too.
He studied me for a moment longer, then nodded once.
All right, he said. Let's see what we're dealing with.
He turned to his system and started pulling up the account profile. I stood beside him, arms crossed, watching the screen populate line by line. Account name, Maya Murphy. Status active. Opened 14 months ago. 14 months. I was in another state 14 months ago, working on a compliance review that kept me traveling 3 weeks out of every month. I hadn't even been physically present to open something like this. Scroll, I said. James did. Authorized access points. 3 IP addresses. 2 of them unfamiliar. One I leaned closer. That one I said.
What about it?
James asked.
I've seen it before.
He glanced at me, where I didn't answer right away, because I wasn't just remembering the number. I was remembering the context. My father's office? The home network he insisted on setting up himself. The one he never let anyone else configure. Can you trace it, I asked. James nodded slowly.
It'll take a few minutes. Take them.
He ran the lookup. The system processed, then returned a result. Registered location. A business suite. Downtown. I stared at the address. Not my father's home. Not the bank. Something else. What is it? James asked. I don't know yet, I said. But I had a feeling. Pull the other access logs, I added. He did. Login timestamps. Patterns. Most activity clustered in short bursts, late evenings, weekends. Times when I would have been traveling. Unavailable. Easy to account for. This was planned, I said quietly. Yeah, James replied. It wasn't random. He clicked into the account creation file. Digital signature attached. I watched as the document opened. My name. My information. My signature. Perfect. Too perfect, because it wasn't mine. They used a scanned version, I said, probably from an old document. James zoomed in. You're right, he said. There's no pressure variation, it's a flat image. Can you confirm that if this goes to formal review? Absolutely. I exhaled slowly. That was one piece, not all of it. Transaction history, I said. He pulled it up. And there it was, money moving in, then out, always through the same sequence. Primary accounts. Intermediary. My account. Consulting firm. A bridge. They hadn't just hidden money, they'd routed it through me. Why, James asked. Because it creates distance, I said, and cover. If anyone looks too closely, he said, catching on it looks like you're the one consolidating funds. Exactly. He leaned back, shaking his head slightly. That's not just risky, he said. That's intentional exposure. I didn't respond, because now I understood the email. If she finds anything, it's on you. They hadn't just been worried I'd uncover the truth. They'd been preparing to redirect it. My phone buzzed. Whitaker, I answered. Maya, he said, voice tighter than before. We've received a formal request from your father's attorney. They're alleging financial misconduct tied to an account under your name. I know, I said. You know, he repeated. I'm looking at it right now. There was a pause. Can you explain it? He asked. Yes, I said. But not over the phone. Another pause.
Then I suggest you do it quickly, he said, because if this becomes a formal claim, your authority as executor could be suspended pending investigation. I won't let that happen, I said. I meant it. Because now this wasn't just about protecting the estate, it was about protecting myself. I ended the call and looked back at the screen, at the account, at the transactions, at the structure they thought was airtight. They expected you to back off, James said quietly. I know, and you didn't. No. He nodded once. Then you're going to need more than this, he said. You're going to need to prove intent, not just mechanics. He was right. Patterns show what happened. Intent shows why. And why is what holds up when everything else gets challenged. I reached into my bag and pulled out the USB, the one my grandfather had hidden, the one they didn't know I had. I think I have something that helps, I said. James looked at it. What is it? Insurance, I replied. Because whatever they thought they'd built, they hadn't accounted for one thing. My grandfather didn't just suspect them. He planned for me to find out. And now I had to prove that I wasn't part of what they'd done. I was the one they tried to bury inside it. I didn't plan the confrontation. But once I understood the full structure of what they'd done, I knew avoiding it would only give them more time to reshape the narrative. So I went back to the house, not because I needed anything from it anymore, but because that was where they still felt in control. It was early evening when I walked in. The lights were already on in the living room, and I could hear voices low tense overlapping just enough to tell me they weren't expecting me. Good. I stepped into the room without announcing myself. My father stopped mid-sentence. Ethan turned his posture, stiffening the moment he saw me. For a second, no one spoke. Then my father exhaled slowly, like he'd already decided how this was going to go. You shouldn't be here, he said. I closed the door behind me. I live here as much as you do, I replied. Or did that change when you said I was dead to you? His jaw tightened, but he didn't take the bait. We're in the middle of something, he said. If this is about the audit, it is, I cut in, but not in the way you think. Ethan shifted in his seat, eyes flicking between us. What are you talking about? He asked. I didn't answer him. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the center of the room and set my bag down on the table. Calm, deliberate. Then I pulled out a printed set of documents and placed them in front of my father. Go ahead, I said. Look. He didn't move at first. Then he picked them up. I watched his eyes scan the page just enough to recognize the format. Transaction logs, account routing, patterns. He didn't get far before he set them down again. I've already seen this, he said. You're still misinterpreting it. I nodded slightly. I figured you'd say that. Then I pulled out the second set. Try this one. Ethan leaned forward this time, reading over my father's shoulder. The account details. The one under my name. The one they thought would protect them. I saw it hit him. Not the content. The implication. His eyes flicked up to mine, then back down again. You're seriously going to stand here and pretend you don't recognize that? I asked quietly. My father didn't answer. He leaned back slower this time. You opened that account, he said. Your name is on it. That's your defense, I asked. That I committed fraud against my own grandfather and then voluntarily audited myself. Ethan swallowed but didn't speak. My father did. You've always been dramatic, he said. You find a few irregularities and suddenly it's a conspiracy. There it was. Minimization. Reframing. He wasn't denying the structure. He was attacking my interpretation. So I changed the frame. 14 months ago, I said I was working out of state. 3 weeks out of every month. I have travel records, access logs, expense reports. I wasn't even physically present to open that account.
Ethan looked up again.
My father didn't. Digital signatures can be authorized remotely, he replied.
Not with a flat image pulled from a scanned document, I said. No pressure variation, no timestamp alignment with my activity. That got his attention. Not because he was surprised, because I was specific.
You've been digging pretty deep, he said.
Yes, I replied. That's what an audit is. The room tightened again. I reached into my bag one more time. This time I didn't take out paper. I took out the USB and set it on the table. Neither of them touched it, but they both looked at it. Ethan first. Then my father.
What's that?
Ethan asked, though his voice already knew the answer.
Something Grandpa hid, I said.
My father's expression didn't change, but something behind it did.
You shouldn't be going through his private materials, he said.
I almost smiled. Private, I repeated.
Or inconvenient.
I picked up the USB and held it between my fingers.
There's a video on here, I said. 3 minutes and 42 seconds.
Ethan's gaze dropped to the table.
My father stayed focused on me. Then play it, he said.
I didn't. Not yet. Because this wasn't about surprising them. It was about watching them react before they knew exactly what I had. Do you want to tell me what's on it? I asked instead. Silence. Not defensive. Not confused. Measured. My father leaned forward slightly.
You're making a mistake, Maya, he said. Whatever you think you found, you don't understand the full picture.
Then explain it, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. Ethan shifted in his seat.
Dad,
he started, then stopped. My father didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on me.
I moved the money, he said finally. Just like that. No build-up, no denial, just admission.
Ethan closed his eyes briefly.
I did it to protect what your grandfather built,
my father continued. He was making decisions that would have weakened everything, splitting assets, redirecting funds, trusting the wrong people. Meaning me, I said. He didn't answer directly.
You've never had to carry the responsibility I have, he said instead.
You don't understand what it takes to hold something like that together. I let that sit for a second. Then I asked the only question that mattered. So you used my name? I didn't flinch. It was necessary, he said. Ethan looked up sharply. Necessary, he repeated. You said it was temporary, that we'd move it back once everything stabilized. My father finally looked at him.
And we would have,
he said. If she hadn't started digging, there it was. Not just admission, blame, redirected, calculated. I nodded slowly. So that was the plan, I said. Use my identity as a buffer, and if anything surfaced, let it point back to me.
That's not what this is, he said.
It is exactly what this is, I replied. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to, because for the first time the structure was visible. Not just to me, to everyone in the room. Ethan leaned back, running a hand through his hair. This wasn't supposed to go this far, he said quietly. No, I agreed. It wasn't supposed to be discovered. My father stood.
You're taking this too far, he said. This is family.
I stood too. So was I said. That landed. Not loud, not dramatic, just true. For a second, something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, or recognition. But it didn't stay. Because control mattered more. You still have a choice, he said. You can stop this. Finish the audit sign-off and we move forward. We, I repeated. Yes, he said. As a family. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I picked up the USB again. No, I said. As an executor. Silence. heavy, final, because that was the line. Not anger, not revenge, a boundary, and once it was set, it wasn't moving. I didn't leave the house immediately after that. Not because I had anything left to say, but because I wanted them to sit in what had just happened. For once, I wasn't the one reacting. They were. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and gave them time to decide how they were going to respond now that denial was no longer an option. When I came back, my father was on the phone. Low voice, controlled. We're going to need to file before she formalizes anything, he was saying. Yes, today. He ended the call the moment he saw me. That your attorney, I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Ethan was pacing now, one hand pressed to the back of his neck like he was trying to hold something in place. This is getting out of control, he said. We can still fix this. I set the glass down on the table. No, I said. You can't fix something you never planned to admit. That's not fair, he shot back. You didn't think I'd find it, I said. That's the only part you're leaving out. He stopped pacing, looked at me, really looked for the first time. I didn't think he'd go this far, he said quietly. With the will, with the audit. I thought we had time. You had time, I said. You just used it to move more money. My father stepped forward again, reclaiming space like he always did. We're done talking about this here, he said. This moves into legal now. It already has, I replied, and then I did something he didn't expect. I didn't argue. I didn't push. I simply picked up my bag. I'll be in touch through counsel, I said. That stopped him, because that was language he understood. Distance, structure, control, but not his. You're really going to do this, he said. I already did, I replied, and then I walked out. The next 48 hours moved faster than anything that had come before. Whitaker filed the formal audit request that same night. By morning, all primary accounts connected to my grandfather's estate were placed under temporary review status. Not frozen yet, but restricted. No large transfers, no restructuring. By the afternoon that changed. The preliminary audit findings came back with enough red flags to trigger the contingency clause. And just like that, everything stopped. Accounts frozen, assets locked, access suspended. Not permanently, but enough to make it clear control had shifted. Whitaker called me as soon as it was confirmed. It's in effect, he said. The trust provision has been activated. I stood by the window in my apartment looking out at a city that suddenly felt quieter. What does that mean practically, I asked. It means no one touches anything without your authorization, he said. Not your father, not your brother, not anyone. And the audit moves into full review, he replied. External team, independent verification. I nodded even though he couldn't see it. Good. There was a pause. They've retained counsel, he added. Aggressive counsel. I assumed they would. They're going to challenge your authority, he continued, and they're going to use that account under your name to do it. I know, I said. Do you have enough to counter it? He asked. I looked over at my desk, at the organized folders, at the USB, at the pieces my grandfather had left behind. Yes, I said. I do. The formal audit process wasn't dramatic. It was methodical, and that made it more powerful. Every transaction was traced, every account mapped, every signature verified. What I had built in a few hours, the auditors expanded into something comprehensive, structured, defensible. They didn't rely on assumptions, they followed the money, and the money told the same story every time. Layered transfers, shell entities, unauthorized movement, and right in the middle of it my name. But this time it wasn't just listed, it was analyzed. Creation records, access logs, signature verification, and that's where the structure started to break. The digital signature attached to the account didn't match authenticated samples of my handwriting. The login activity didn't match my device history. The IP trace tied back to a leased office space downtown, the same one James had flagged, a space that according to the records was registered under Murphy Consulting Group, Ethan's company. That wasn't interpretation. That was linkage. Clear. Direct. Hard to explain away. 2 weeks after the audit began, we sat down again. Same conference room, different atmosphere. This time there were more people. Whitaker, 2 external auditors, my father's attorney, Ethan, and my father. He looked different. Not weaker, but tighter. Like everything he said now had to be calculated, not assumed. The lead auditor spoke first. "We've completed the initial phase of review," she said, "and we've identified consistent patterns of unauthorized fund transfers across multiple accounts." She slid a report across the table. "Additionally, we've confirmed that an account registered under Ms. Murphy's name was used as an intermediary in these transactions." My father's attorney leaned forward. "Which implicates her," he said. The auditor didn't react. "Not necessarily," she replied, "because the account's creation and usage do not align with her verified activity." She turned a page. "The digital signature is a static reproduction. The login access points trace to a commercial office space not associated with Ms. Murphy, and the account's operational pattern suggests third-party control." She paused, then said it plainly. "In simple terms, the account appears to have been created and used without her knowledge." Silence. Heavy. Different from before. Because this time it wasn't just me saying it. It was documented, reviewed, confirmed. Ethan looked at the table. My father didn't. He looked straight ahead. Still, controlled. Until the auditor added one more thing. The office space tied to the access logs is registered to Murphy Consulting Group. She didn't need to say the name. Everyone in the room already knew it. Ethan's. That was the second twist. Not just exposure. Attribution. Clear enough that no one had to explain it. Whitaker folded his hands. Based on these findings, he said the contingency clause remains in effect. The estate will continue under trust administration. My father's attorney started to speak, then stopped. Because there wasn't a clean argument left. Not yet. Not with the evidence structured like this. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Because for the first time since the funeral, the truth wasn't something I was trying to prove. It was something they had to respond to, and they didn't have a response ready. Not a real one. Not anymore. By the time the second audit report came in, the room felt different before anyone even spoke. Not calmer, just settled. Like the outcome had already started shaping itself, and we were only there to acknowledge it. Whitaker had sent me the summary the night before. I'd read it once, then again. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I needed to see how it held up without me in the room explaining it. It held. Every piece connected cleanly. No gaps. No assumptions stretched too far. When I walked into the conference room, my father was already there, sitting in the same chair he always chose. Head of the table, even when he technically wasn't anymore. Ethan sat beside him, quieter than I'd ever seen him. They both looked up when I entered. Neither of them spoke. I took my seat across from them and placed a single folder on the table. Not everything. Just enough. Whitaker entered a moment later, followed by the lead auditor and a representative from the bank's legal department. No one wasted time. "We're here to review the final findings of the audit," the auditor said, her tone steady, "and to determine next steps regarding the administration of the estate." She opened her report.
The investigation confirms a consistent pattern of unauthorized transfers originating from Mr. Harold Murphy's primary accounts over a 36-month period. She paused not for effect, but to keep the structure clear. These funds were routed through intermediary accounts, including one registered under Ms. Maya Murphy's name. However, she glanced up briefly. That account has been verified as fraudulently established and operated without her knowledge. No reaction from me. I'd already processed that part, but hearing it stated like that in a room where it couldn't be argued away shifted something, finalized it. The auditor continued, further tracing links. The operational control of these transactions to Murphy Consulting Group with access points, device logs, and timing patterns aligning with internal activity from that entity. She didn't need to look at Ethan. He already knew. We also identified communications indicating intent to move funds prior to potential changes in estate control, she added. That was the part my father couldn't reframe. Intent. Not just action. Not just outcome. Choice. Whitaker folded his hands. Given these findings, he said the contingency clause outlined in the will remains fully enforceable. The estate will continue under protected trust administration with Ms. Murphy retaining sole fiduciary authority. My father's attorney shifted slightly. And criminal referral, he asked. That was the question the entire room had been circling without saying out loud. The auditor didn't answer immediately. She looked at Whitaker, then at the bank representative, then finally at me, because technically that decision didn't belong to them. It belonged to the executor. To me. The room went quiet in a way that felt different from before. Not tense. Expectant. My father spoke first. His voice was lower than I'd ever heard it. Maya, he said. No edge. No control. Just careful. This doesn't have to go further. I looked at him. Really looked. For the first time since the funeral, I wasn't seeing him as the person who had just lost control. I was seeing him as someone who had built something over years, reputation, authority, identity, and was now watching it narrow down to a single decision he couldn't make. I did what I thought was necessary, he continued. Maybe I went too far, but it wasn't about taking from you. It was about keeping everything from falling apart. Ethan didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His silence was already an admission of how far things had gone. I let a few seconds pass, not to make it dramatic, just to make sure I wasn't reacting, because this wasn't a moment for reaction. It was a moment for choice. There are two paths here, I said finally. No one interrupted. If I move forward with a criminal referral, this becomes a case, I continued. Charges, investigations, public records. My father held my gaze. And if you don't? He asked. Then it stays contained, I said. The trust remains in place. You lose control of the estate permanently. The findings stand. But it doesn't escalate beyond that. Ethan looked up at me then. Not hopeful. Just waiting. I could feel the weight of it. Not guilt. Not pressure. Just the reality that whatever I decided would define what this became. For them. And for me. I thought about the last few weeks, the funeral, the words at the grave, the account in my name, the structure they built, the way they had already decided what role I would play in it. And then I thought about something else. Not what they had done, but what I wanted to carry forward. Because those weren't the same thing. I'm not referring this for criminal prosecution, I said. The words landed quietly, but they held. My father exhaled, slow, controlled. Not relief, not entirely. Something closer to recalibration. Ethan closed his eyes for a second, then nodded once almost to himself.
Whitaker didn't react outwardly, but I saw the slight shift in his posture. Acknowledgement. That decision will be documented, he said. It should be, I replied. I looked back at my father. This isn't forgiveness, I added, and it's not a reset. He didn't argue that, because he couldn't. The trust stays in place, I continued. You don't manage anything, you don't move anything, and you don't use my name for anything ever again. He nodded once. Slow, measured, understood. Ethan didn't speak, but for the first time he didn't look like he was waiting for direction either. The room moved on after that. Procedures, documentation, next steps. All of it structured, contained, predictable, but underneath it something had shifted, not just in the case, in the balance, because this wasn't about winning. It was about ending something the right way, and for the first time since this started, I felt like I had. A year later, I unlocked a different office. Not my grandfather's, not Whitaker's conference room, mine. The name on the glass read Murphy Trust Administration. I hadn't planned to keep the name. For a while, I even considered changing it, putting distance between myself and everything it represented. But in the end, I realized something simple. A name only carries what you allow it to carry, and I wasn't going to let it belong to them anymore. Inside the space was quiet, clean, intentional, not oversized, not performative, just enough. A desk, 2 chairs, a shelf with neatly labeled files, everything in its place. That part I learned from my grandfather. I set my bag down and opened the first folder of the day. Quarterly reports. The trust had stabilized months ago. Assets that had once been quietly moved around were now fully accounted for, structured, transparent. A portion of the estate had already been distributed exactly as outlined in the will to a series of small foundations my grandfather had supported privately for years: education grants, medical assistance programs, local housing initiatives. Nothing flashy, but consistent. That part surprised me at first. Not the giving, but how quietly he had done it. No announcements. No recognition. Just intention. I closed the file and leaned back slightly. For a long time, I thought what he left me was responsibility, control, authority. But it wasn't that. Not really. It was clarity. The kind you only recognize after everything else gets stripped away. My phone buzzed on the desk. Unknown number. I let it ring once before answering. Maya Murphy, I said. A pause. Then my father's voice. I didn't think you'd answer. I almost didn't. What do you need? I asked. Straight to the point. That was new. Another pause. I wanted to check in, he said. See how things are going. It wasn't casual, it wasn't warm, but it also wasn't calculated in the way it used to be. More careful. They're going well, I said. The trust is stable. I saw the reports, he replied. You've been thorough. That word again. From him it meant something different now. I've been doing my job, I said. Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. I know you said this wasn't forgiveness, he said after a moment. I did. And I'm not asking for that, he added. I believed him, or at least I believed that he understood what that line meant now. I wanted you to know, he continued. I've stepped away from the business. That surprised me. Not because I thought he couldn't, but because I hadn't expected him to. Murphy Consulting Group doesn't exist anymore, he said. I closed it. I didn't respond right away, because I wasn't sure what he expected from that.
Acknowledgement, approval, absolution. I hope that was the right decision, he added. There it was. Not a request, but something close. I think it was necessary, I said. Nothing more, nothing less. Another pause. Longer this time. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were, he said. They won't, I replied. No hesitation, no softness around it. Just truth. He let out a quiet breath. I understand, and for the first time, I think he actually did. We didn't say goodbye in any meaningful way. The call just ended. Not abruptly, not emotionally, just finished. I set the phone down and looked around the office, at the files, at the structure, at the life I had built out of something that was never supposed to belong to me in the first place. I didn't feel victorious. That wasn't the word for it. I felt steady, grounded in a way I hadn't been before, because what happened didn't make me stronger. It made me clearer about what I would carry forward and what I wouldn't. I picked up the next file and opened it. Work to do. Still. But this time, it was mine to decide how it got done. Sometimes the hardest part isn't uncovering what people did to you. It's deciding what you're going to do with that truth once you have it. If you've ever been put in a position where family expected loyalty at the cost of your integrity, you know how complicated that line can be. Choosing accountability over silence doesn't feel like revenge. It feels like loss at first, but over time it becomes something else. It becomes a boundary, and boundaries aren't punishments. They're protections. What I learned is that forgiveness and access are not the same thing. You can let go of anger without reopening the door that allowed the harm in the first place. You can move forward without pretending nothing happened. And sometimes the most powerful form of justice is not destroying someone. It's refusing to let them define your role in their story anymore. If you've ever had to draw that kind of line, I'd really like to hear how you handled it. And if you're still figuring it out, you're not alone in that. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for staying through the parts that weren't easy. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.